Seat, please, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. So we come to our final and 11th presentation of the 2020 AISTS Client Team Project presentations. And our client is Populous, and the team has been investigating possible correlations between social media and the rise in global live events, including those in the world of sport. It's our pleasure to welcome in London via Zoom, welcome back, should I say, is Matt Grace. He's Senior Associate Head of Marketing at Populous. So welcome, Matt. So team, last but not least, very much looking forward to this presentation, and I give you the floor. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being with us here through the long 2 days. I usually am not a believer of saving the best for the last. It doesn't work very well in football, but I can see the merit in Michael doing this. So our clients for this project have been Populous. As most of you will know, Populous are one of the biggest architecture and design practices, and they've been building communities and places where people come together and celebrate. So when we talk about communities, what is essential to understand is that communities no longer mean just physical communities. Communities today are growing digital, and especially given the times today and the COVID-19 situation, that might be a more important community. And that is where our topic today comes in, of social media and the business of global live events. Now, before I jump in, I'd like to introduce you to our team. I'm Sanket. With me are James, Dom, Dennis, and Juan. We come from very different backgrounds of marketing, real estate, media, venture capital, and entrepreneurship. This led to certain challenges, a lot of different ideas on different topics, but in the end, it led to a brilliant result and different perspective that yielded this research paper. Jumping right into our topic, as you'll see, when we talk about social media and global live sport events, there are two essential things that stand out: the social media and global live sport events. Now, these are, on the face of it, they look like two different industries that do not have a lot in common. But that is not doing it justice. There are two sides to this story. If you look at social media and the textbook definition of social media, it's just social networking sites where people communicate through different medium and in a community. But that isn't the reality of social media. Social media as an industry is much bigger. This is an industry that has over half of the population of the world on it. The numbers individually are mind-boggling. You have 2.6 billion people on Facebook, 1 billion people on Instagram. There's another 2 billion people on YouTube, and another billion on LinkedIn and Twitter. Even TikTok, which we hadn't heard of for in the last 12 months, before last 12 months, has 800 million subscribers. This is the reality of social media. This is an industry that did not exist 20 years ago, but is today valued at $800 billion. On the flip side, we have global live events. So for the purpose of this study, we were asked to cut it down, the scope of global live events, to sport events, and further sport events with international participations. So even in this shortened scope, this is an industry that produces 300 million attendees every year, and that leads to $30 billion of revenue. So looking at this, and in fact, the valuation of the industry in itself is over $1 trillion. These are two massively big industries, and there's no way that they don't intertwine with each other. So studying this was not just fascinating, but in fact quite essential, and that is where our research paper comes in. While conducting this research, we found 5 major topics that came up. Number 1 was attendance and viewership. So in terms of attendance and viewership, we looked at how the attendance and viewership figures of global live sport events have evolved over the last 15-20 years since the advent of social media. Next, we had use of social media, where we looked at both the attendees' perspective as well as the event organizers' perspective, and saw how they use social media to interact with one another. Next, we had social media activation, looked at from the point of view of international federation and event organizers. This was done to see how they are using social media to attract more and more fans towards their sports and towards their events. Then we had sponsorship, which till date remains one of the biggest revenue earners for event organizers. And we needed to understand how social media has entered into a sponsorship mix for all these event organizing companies. Lastly, there's COVID-19. This was not something that was planned, obviously, 8 months ago, but the situation forced our hands. A study of global live sport events cannot be done without looking at the last 5 months, where we've had scarcely any global live sport event, and even now when we are getting them, it's being done without live attendees. This has led to a change in the way event organizers produce content, they strategize their content and put out content on social media. It has changed the way fans of sports consume content on social media. And this is why this played a big part in our research paper, in our project. Lastly, I'll take you through our methodology. So first thing we did was we did a desk research and literature review. This was quite important in forming a base for our project. But what it told us primarily was the fact that while there's a lot of information about social media and live events, there seems to be scarcely any research done on how the two are linked to one another, which is why we further went on to a two-pronged study where we did a survey as well as a case study. So surveys were done from the point of view of attendees of global live sport events, and case studies were done from the point of view of event organizers and international federations who hold these live events. So to take you further through the survey, I'll pass the floor to Dom.
Thanks, Sank. So as Sank has mentioned, we designed a survey for the attendees. This was to try and understand what they want from social media, how they're interacting with live events on social media. And to do this, we designed a survey that had 17 questions that we then disseminated across social media platforms through our own networks and using the AISTS network. The idea was to go and actually do some in-person interviews as well at events, but we couldn't do this due to the COVID situation, unfortunately. One of the key things for us was to make sure that we were speaking to actual active attendees. So we had a first qualifying question that asked whether people have actually been to an event since the start of 2019. And from this, we received 300 responses, 205 of which were qualified. I'll now take you through some of the main findings. First of all, what is the main platform that you use when attending a live event? Now, interestingly here, we've got generational differences. So Instagram comes first for the younger generations, for the 18 to 35. And then beyond that, 45 plus, 36 plus, you've got Facebook. And we believe that this might have something to do with when these platforms were actually released to the market. So for the older generations, Facebook is something that came out earlier before Instagram, and that might have affected how it was adopted. Then we move over to one of the big things that we were looking at in our research here, which was, is there any correlation, causation between the use of social media and attendance at live events? So we started asking people, are you more active today on social media than you were 5 years ago? And roughly 80% of people said, yes, they are more active today than they were 5 years ago. Now, if we look at, are you attending more live events? We had similar response rates as well, like 80, 70% female to male saying that they are attending more events today than they were 5 years ago. However, interestingly, when we asked them directly, do you think your social media usage has an effect on you attending a live event? They said only 40% roughly came back and said, yes, there seemed to be a link between the two. Now, having said this, we then asked them, does being part of a social media community, so this is a little bit more specific. I'm unashamedly part of Golf Nutters fan group on Facebook versus just being a follower of the ATP tennis tour. And in this instance, the younger generations are saying, yes, being part of a fan group is helpful. The older ones, less so. And this is something to look at. We seem to have an outlier here for the 55 to 64 males, potentially due to limited number of responses. But on the whole, for younger generations, being part of a community does seem to influence them. We also thought it was interesting to see what people were looking for when they actually went to a live event, and not just looking purely at how people are interacting online in the digital sphere, but when they actually get there. And what we saw is that Wi-Fi is the biggest want, the biggest amenity that people need when they go to live events. And this probably ties in with the iconic symbolic photo opportunities there, because people are wanting to post when they go to live events. This is what they want to do, and it's the point at which most people are using social media is during the event. So there's obviously a tie-in here. So I suppose ultimately, to conclude from the attendees side, there's generational differences, and this could be interesting for event owners and organisers when looking at what to post, how to post, depending on who they're trying to speak to. At the moment, we can't see a correlation between social media usage and event attendance, but this is something to be explored, and maybe with more data, this could be something that could be capitalised upon. And then we've got Wi-Fi that for owners and organisers, they should be providing this, not only because people want it there, but it's when people are most interacting. So So it's almost essential for people to provide this. Now, Dennis will take you through the case studies.
Thank you, James. Yes, I will go through case studies and the main takeaways from them. We conducted semi-structured interviews with 5 international federations, all of which had their marquee live event in the previous year. And apart from that, FIBA was a leader in the International Federation social media ranking report made by BCW Sports. FINA made the biggest improvement in that report. Hockey and volleyball federations, they have an exemplary gender balance across disciplines. And FISU was interesting for us as it represents multi-sport competitions for student athletes. So attendance and viewership. All federations stated that attendance and viewership of their major events have increased over recent years. And one of the reasons is that women's sport is becoming more popular and getting more coverage, and subsequently it drives attendance and viewership up. At the same time, they see as an extra opportunity of transforming with time their active online followers into attendees as well. Use of social media. All responders admitted that social media are an integral part of their everyday operational activities. They use all the main social platforms, including TikTok, which has been actively adopted by younger generation. While Facebook is staying the biggest platform with the most followers for each of 5 federations, they revealed that their organization have shifted focus to Instagram, which is more interactive and facilitates the link between fans and athletes. The main goal of their activities online is engagement and informing of the public. It's to retain already established fans, to attract possible new followers, and to make the general audience aware of their main events. And the most efficient ways to do that is direct communication with followers, is using user-generated content, that's photos or videos created by followers, and engagement of athletes. Social media activations. Talking about social media activations, all our responders, they praise social media for their ability to engage public disregarding of the calendar of events. But obviously the main peak of the activities in their social media accounts falls on the times of competitions, as the social media help to amplify exposure of the events, and at the same time, they help to enhance the experience that fans living through the competitions, both for attendees and for those staying at home, as social media help fans to be part of their action, disregarding of their physical presence, by letting, for example, voting for the best athlete of the event, by having their photos or video posted on the official accounts of international federations, or communicating directly with the athlete, or going even further by using virtual reality technologies. Sponsorship, similarly important for social media and sponsorship going up, both to organizations and to sponsors. For example, FIBA can boast of 25 million followers in their social media accounts combined, but at the same time, they admitted that there is still a lot of work to do to, let's say, unlock the full potential of social media sponsorship packages, and that TV broadcasting are still the biggest part of their current sponsorship deals. COVID. Here, I would like to start with a quote from the FIBA digital content manager, who said that COVID-19 pandemic has changed forever the way FIBA deals with social media. And all federations that we interviewed, they shared this sentiment, as in absence of events, social media allowed international federations stay relevant and engage their public. Therefore, social media today are not optional anymore, but must have and must use tools. And must use tool. To summarize, to stay relevant in the post-COVID-19 world, social media should be used actively. They should be used all year round, therefore non-stop. And in the heart of their content, there should be a fan-oriented. And now I give the floor to Juan, who will present the overall conclusion of our research. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. So I'll go with you a little bit through where we are now and where we see this going. And I'll do this by the same time linking a little bit of what James and Dennis have been bringing up and trying to make some sense of why we went to both sides of the table. I'll do that with the use of a color code, a bit of a traffic light fashion. So the first conclusion when it comes to attendance and viewership is that we know that for what we've seen so far, there doesn't seem to necessarily be a causal relationship between social media and the attendance. We do think that this is likely to change with the more implementation of CRMs and fun relationship management systems that are actually being now put in place. So we do consider, and this is something that is not just us, but it's also something that coming from the federations, that this will likely be showing some of those touch points and how they link. The other thing that is interesting is that while the younger communities, as James was pointing out, are recognizing the importance of those social media communities, this is not necessarily something that we've seen with the older generations. And then this is also something that we see has a difference in the way that people use social media. While the younger generations are more drawn to pictures and videos and the rise of Instagram and YouTube, we do see the older generation still interacting more with sort of text-based platforms. And this includes Twitter and Facebook, and it also relates to those windows that are previous and after the event, where social media is also used as an information board. What we see is that there is a match in where federations or event organizers and attendees are going for this information and content. So we see this positive. And we do recommend that this is actually used in conjunction, both for boosting image content and information in different platforms. When it comes to activations, we see a little bit of a mismatch. We don't see them completely aligned. We feel that there's an area of opportunity. While the younger generations are looking for photo opportunities or actively looking for Wi-Fi, we do see that this is not necessarily something that came up super strong when we did our interviews with the event organizers. So it wasn't quite in the priorities when we were having these conversations. And we do think that the fact that user-generated content has just become so important to the strategy of social media, we do see that as a sign that from the attendee side, people are ready to interact and engage. This leads to sponsorship. We do see here an area of opportunity. We don't necessarily see that green as everything is perfect, but rather something that's showing potential. We see that activations seem to show that potential. And as we see social media growing, we also do see interest from the sponsors to interact with the social media managers and the people who are creating the digital content for the event organizers. They want them at the table. So this is becoming something much, much more relevant for both event organizers, attendees, and of course, sponsors. We do see that there's a big opportunity there, and we recommend working towards what we call organic activations with something that feels, that drives value, and it complements what we're showing, say, in our main broadcast through TV. So behind the scenes and interviews and anything that we can, in a way, create a 360 approach. As it comes to the future, well, we still don't know whether this is going to be green, yellow, or red, but we definitely see that the appearance of COVID and the fact that the world that we knew kind of came to a halt is definitely going to have a dent in what we're going to see in the future. So something that we've seen once and over again is that the strategy for all these event organizers is going from event focused to event agnostic, where all year round we're going to be having to engage with our fans and put them at the core of our content strategy. We're looking at flexible, dynamic content, and we're also going to be seeing a revolution of data. So the fact that we haven't been conclusive about certain things that we've been looking at, we know this will change once we actually have that information. So we believe that CRMs will be making big waves into what we're going to see with all these event organizers. And lastly, but not least, the introduction of virtual reality and augmented reality, and same with artificial intelligence, will likely make big shifts in the way that we consume, we attend events. For sure, this is going to be multiplied once 5G is in there, and we've managed to get the connectivity in place. So with that, I'm going to thank you all for your attention, and I'm going to be also very thankful of the fact that we're the last presenters from the whole year.